Hello and welcome back to Dungeons and Dragons Basics from Dice to Roleplay. In the last episode, we began talking about D&D races, and we went through our first 14 races in the game. This episode, we will be doing the next 14 and talking about them. The first one we'll talk about is the Leonine. Leonine are mountain warriors that defend their homes brilliantly, and they live in nomadic packs. Think of them as humanoids with lion-like faces. Leonine get +2 Constitution and +1 Strength, Dark Vision. They have Claws, because lions, which means you can do extra damage with your unarmed strikes. They have Hunter's Instincts, which means they get proficiency in one of these options, either Athletics, Intimidation, Perception, or Survival. They also have an ability called Daunting Roar, which means as a bonus action they can roar, and then creatures have to do a saving throw, and if they don't pass, they become frightened, which means they have to run away from you. Leonine rarely leave their homeland, but some do go to explore the world past the plains they call their home. So think of them, because they're lions, right? They live in like savannas and plains, similar areas like that. Next up is a satyr, and satyrs are goat men. They have goat bottoms, but human tops. Satyrs are good-spirited and gregarious. They like to party. They wish to see the world's pleasures and will travel the world to find them. So they're all about having a good time. Satyrs get +2 to charisma, right? They're all about having fun, and +1 to dexterity. They are fae, which means they are not humanoid. They come from a fairy realm. They have the ability to ram, which means they can use their head and horns for unarmed strikes, and that means they get to add some bludgeoning damage to their unarmed strikes. They have magic resistance because they're from the Feywild, so that means magic resistance. They get advantage on saving throws against spells and magic. They have mirthful leaps. Whenever you make a long or high jump, you get to roll a d8 and add that to your jump height, so they get to jump a little bit higher than normal people can. They have reveler, which means they have proficiency in performance and persuasion, and they get to choose a musical instrument to be good at. Satyrs usually play like lutes and guitars and stuff like that. Satyrs are spontaneous and whimsical, and they don't let others hinder their happiness. So their main goal is always just to pursue their own happiness. Fairies are wee folk, means they're tiny, and they come from the Feywild. They are inherently magical, and they can have distinct physical features that set them apart from each other, like different kinds of wings, different ear shapes, stuff like that. Hair color, all those things can make fairies look different. Fairies get a +2 to any ability score you choose, and then +1 to a different one. So you get to choose which ability scores you increase. They have fairy flight, which means they get to have a flight speed, but it's not very fast. It does not require that you have wings for that to happen. They have fairy magic, which means you know druidcraft and fairy fire spells. Druidcraft lets you become different animals, and fairy fire is a way to like shoot fire at people. You can cast fairy fire without using a spell slot, and you can choose any one of these stats to be your spell modifier. And Fey Passage means you can squeeze through space as narrow as 1 inch wide. So you can basically like, get under doors and like go through walls and stuff like that. Fairies can be pretty tricky, especially to non-Fey creatures, and they use magic to play tricks and trap people. So they're pranksters usually. Rabbitfolk are also from the Feywild, and they're basically, you can imagine like if you've played Pokemon recently, like Cinderace, they're like rabbit people. They're very into freedom and travel, and they have very keen senses and really powerful legs. They also get to choose which ability scores they get bonuses in, and they have abilities like Hair Trigger, which means they get to add their proficiency bonus to initiative rolls. Leporine Senses, which means they get proficiency in perception. They have Lucky Footwork, which means if I fail a dexterity save, I can add more dice to it and see if I can save anyway. And Rabbit Hop, which means every time you move at least 5 feet, you can hop by rolling a d12 and go even further. Rabbitfolk are blessed with luck and often find themselves getting away from danger on their adventures, and that's because like rabbit's feet. So it's kind of a play on that. They're supposed to be lucky. Bugbears are giant creatures, and they rely on strength and prefer to operate at night. They can be rather aggressive, but mostly rather lethargic. Bugbears get +2 to strength, +1 to dexterity, dark vision, long limbed, which means their reach for melee attacks is much longer because they have these really long arms. Powerful build, which we know is being able to carry stuff that's heavier than they should be able to. Sneaky, which means they're proficient in stealth, so they're really good at being like assassins. And surprise attack. If you surprise a creature on the first turn of combat, the attack deals an extra 2d6, which is a potential for 12 more hit points of damage. Bugbears are rare, but they are bullying kind of creatures, and they like to kind of take advantage of others so they don't have to work as hard because they're kind of lazy. A Furbolg are Fey-oriented half-giants that cluster together in remote forest strongholds. They often choose to be druids or fighters due to their intense size and love of nature. So you can just imagine these like really big, nature-loving giant creatures. Furbolgs get +2 wisdom, +1 strength. Furbolg magic, which means they can cast detect magic and disguise self using wisdom as their modifier. They have hidden step as a bonus action. You can magically turn invisible until your next turn. Powerful build. Speech of beast or leaf, which means they can communicate in a limited manner with all sorts of different animals and plants. And they have advantage on all charisma checks when interacting with animals and plants. Furbolgs tend to keep to themselves and would rather commune with nature than other species. So they're kind of independent, but they will do things maybe if they are motivated to protect nature or their homes. Goblins are often find themselves in difficult situations in a dangerous world, and they try to take advantage of those that they can. They usually get a pretty low lot in different worlds. Goblins get +2 to dexterity and +1 to constitution. Dark vision. Fury of the small, which means they can damage a creature with an attack or spell that they are larger than. They can choose to add more damage by adding their level's worth of extra dice. Nimble escape, which allows them to disengage or hide as a bonus action on each of your turns. So basically, they're really good at stealth and fighting things that are larger than themselves. Goblins are often cunning, and they use stealth and strategy to defeat larger, stronger opponents. Hobgoblins are kind of like pseudo-goblins. War is the lifeblood of a hobgoblin, and the glory of wars are the dreams that they inspire their actions, and they do not fear death. Hobgoblins get +2 to Constitution and +1 to Intelligence, Dark Vision, Martial Thinking, which means they're proficient with 2 martial weapons of their choice. You get to choose the kind of melee weapons you use. Light Armor, which means they can protect themselves. They have Saving Face, which means if they miss an attack or fail an ability check, they gain a bonus to the roll equal to the number of allies you can see within 30 feet. So basically, if they fail in front of their friends, they can get an extra bonus to their roll. Hobgoblins also find cowardice despicable and know that a hero in death is a hero forever. So they are very war and fighting oriented, all about the glory. Canku are haunted by ancient crime that have robbed their species of wings, and they wander as thieves and vagabonds. Think of them basically as humanoid crows. Canku get +2 to dexterity and +1 to wisdom. They have expert forgery, which means they can duplicate another creature's handwriting or craftwork, and you get advantage on all attempts to create forgeries. Canku training, which means you are proficient in 2 of these skills, either acrobatics, deception, stealth, or sleight of hand. Mimicry. You can mimic the sounds that you have heard, including voices, and people can tell they are fake by passing a wisdom saving throw. Canku are often on the fringe of human societies and have an unearned sinister reputation. They do have a lot of skills, though, that make them really good at spycraft and stuff like that. Kobolds are dismissed as foolish or weak reptilian creatures. However, they do have a strong devotion to their tribe. They're basically like lizard people, but not quite. They're like lizard dragon things. Kobolds get +2 to dexterity, dark vision. They have grovel, cower, and beg, which is an action you can cower to distract nearby foes until the start of your next turn. Your allies would get advantage on attack rolls that can see you within 10 feet. Pack tactics, which means they have advantage on rolls against a creature if their allies are close to them. And sunlight sensitivity, which means you get disadvantage on attack rolls and perception checks when you're out in the sun. Kobolds are clever with their hands and work together to overcome their shortcomings, so they work really well when they work as a team. Lizardfolk possess an alien and inscrutable mindset, and they have different inherent desires than warm-blooded creatures. These guys are more of like the lizard foe from Zelda. Lizardfolk have +2 to Constitution and +1 to Wisdom. They do get the ability to bite, which means they can make piercing damage with their unarmed attacks. Cunning Artisan, which means they can harvest the bone and hide to create shields, clubs, and javelins. They have hold breath, which means they can hold their breath for 15 minutes, which is really helpful for like swimming underwater or whatever else, like poison gas and stuff like that. They have hunter's lore, which means they are proficient in 2 of the following skills, either animal handling, nature, perception, stealth, or survival. And they have natural armor, which means their AC is going to be stronger than normal humanoid creatures. They also have hungry jaws, which means that a bonus action they can take a special attack with their bite, and if they hit, they get temp hit points equal to their constitution modifier. So basically it's like they're hungry, they're going to keep fighting until they get something to eat. Lizardfolk live far away from humans, and they live in swamps. Tobaccy are cat people, and they hail from strange and distant lands, and they wander with their cat-like curiosity, usually collecting artifacts, tales, or stories. Tobaccy have high dexterity and charisma, dark vision, feline agility, which means they can double their speed for a turn, cat's claws. They have a climbing speed of 20 and can make unarmed strike with their claws, which adds slashing damage to their attacks. And they have cat's talent, so they get proficient in perception and stealth. Tobaccy are travelers, and they rarely stay in one place for long, so they're very nomadic people. A Triton is kind of like, it's not quite a fish person, but they live underwater. They guard the ocean depths. They live in small settlements near ocean trenches and other dangerous underwater spots. Tritons gain +1 to strength, constitution, and charisma, and are amphibious. They can use control air and water, and they can also cast fog cloud and gust of wind, as well as wall of water. They have dark vision, and they have emissary of the sea, which means they can communicate simple ideas with sea creatures and fish. They also get guardian of the depths, which means they resist cold damage, right? Because they're living so far underwater. Although they're usually found deep underwater, Tritons have become more active in the world above, so it's more common to see Tritons on the surface than in the past. And the final race of the day is the Tortel, which are basically like tortoise people. They're nomad survivalists who begin adventuring once they can walk on 2 legs. And this simple life, as they call it, bewilders other species, as they basically just wander around and do whatever they want. Tortels get +2 to strength and +1 to wisdom. They have claws, hold breath, and their natural armor is really high. They cannot actually wear armor, so that means that their AC is basically just 17 automatically. They get shell defense, which means you can withdraw into their shells at action and have advantage on strength and constitution saving throws while you're in your shell. At this point, though, your speed becomes 0, and you have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. So basically, you're giving up your mobility to be able to resist things. You can also use your bonus action to escape your shell. And of course, survival instinct, which means they are good at survival. Tortels are always eager to explore wonders in the wilderness and are often incredibly friendly. Thanks so much for learning more about Dungeons & Dragons races, and next time we'll finish up with the last 14 we're going to cover in this series. See you next time.